Guys, I'd love to reflect with you on post 9/11 and where you were that day, and that terrible day and the days that followed. I was still getting my bearings, and not only at CNBC but in New York itself. Steve Weiss, you were entrenched in the financial industry on that day, and I believe you were down in that area on September 11th of 2001.
Yes, that's right. I was at Ground Zero. We were at I was at Lehman Brothers at 3 World Financial Center, and I'll never forget it. I mean, at first we heard this large bang, and we're looking, and fire debris, is raining down and attaching to people on the ground. So we're watching those people burn. It was so sad. And then I get a call from an account, Dreyfus, and they said, wait, that was a plane. You guys okay? And then they said, you know what? There appears to be another plane. And it was a tough time. So I left. I was one of the senior guys. I was the only one on our floor. Out of 800 people, we only had 125 because we just opened a new trading floor upstairs. And so as I'm reflecting the car, bringing everybody back with me that I could fit in, we took the last ferry out. As we're going across the river, the buildings are falling, and this white cloud, is just chasing us across the ferry, across the river. And it was a tough time. I led the training program at Lehman, and we were supposed to have 200 college graduates and MBAs at the top of the World Trade Center, windows in the world, and we canceled it 2 weeks before because of budgetary concerns. So 200 young people would have lost their lives. And after we canceled it, I was to go out for a meeting to San Francisco, and I was on Flight 93, scheduled to be on it, but decided not to show up. But the next day, September 12th, I and 19 other senior people from each division were in Jersey City trying to figure out how we're going to stay in business while we watched our building burn across the street. And then the next day, we went back to Ground Zero, myself and one of my partners, to look for real estate. One firm graciously, Capgemini, offered us space, and went down there and came back and told Dick Fold, we can't bring our people down here. The debris was still floating through the air. So it's been a tough time. The searing images of people jumping, of people in distress, of our triage center in our lobby, you never forget those. And, my family wants to go to 9/11 Museum. I can't make that trip. And I don't need any more memories. I've got the fresh memories.
Yeah.
So just a very, very tough time.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think we all understand that. Shannon, you were relatively new in the business, and I think you were in Boston at the time.
I was. I was a naive kid, a couple of years out of school. I went to school with a lot of people who were from New York, and many that were in the financial services industry. And so sitting there at a cube early in the morning, getting calls, from our partners at asset managers, people that worked with us, traders, people we serviced, calling them, trying to make sure that they were okay. And I think it really drove home for me, how important New York was in terms of the financial services industry and how much it was the heart of the industry that I was so excited to be a part of. And just looking back and thinking about, what happened over that next week, but also over the next several years as things really changed. And to hear the stories from folks like Steve who were there, I can't imagine the pain for them, but I certainly remember it. And I hope that we never have to be in that position again, whether in New York or anywhere else here, to be threatened for our sovereignty in such a way.
Yeah. Josh Brown, had you started your career yet?
Yeah, I was working at a broker-dealer in the Helmsley building on 45th Street. My wife was working at Newmark Knight Frank Commercial Real Estate on 42nd Street. So in between us was the MetLife building and Grand Central. So our assumption was after the second plane, any one of these landmarks in Manhattan could be a target, and we wanted to be as far away from Grand Central as possible. The problem was in those days, cell phones were primitive. The system was in its infancy. So it really took me a while to finally get her on the phone. And I said, let's walk east. We'll meet on 2nd Avenue. We'll walk uptown to our apartment. We lived on the Upper East Side. And my most searing memory from that time, living and working in Manhattan, we had southern exposure on the 33rd floor of our building facing south. Every day, that black and gray cloud that Steve described as white, to us it was black a couple of days later, would inch a little bit closer uptown. It seemed to be like almost heading toward us. And while we're looking out the window at that, everything coming through the TV, coming through the radio, is that another attack on New York is imminent, like it's destined to happen, all the false scares, etc. So that's really what I remember from that time. Knew a lot of people down there. Not everybody made it out, of course, but I just feel as though seeing New York come back and going down there these days and visiting with my children and showing them the new Freedom Tower and walking them around the neighborhood, the new subway station, like that. I'm not saying it makes up for anything, of course, but just seeing the city bounce back has been really meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Sarat, lastly, you were on the West Coast.
I was at an analyst conference in San Francisco. I woke up in the morning and then put the TV on and, watching what was going on. And it was surreal because, as Josh said, the phones weren't really working. So I had a couple of my colleagues on the West Coast. We finally got together within about 24 hours. We rented a car, one of the last cars that we could rent, and then just drove east. And we stopped off in Vegas for one night. We kept on going east until we got to Denver, and we finally got on an airplane and came back home. And when we landed, I still remember this. I mean, people were just clapping, that we could actually be back. And, our office was in Midtown. It took a while for everybody to kind of recover and to think about that. But it's a real grounding experience back then. And I was, 52 now. I was 32 at that point. Just started working at my firm. And I just realized, wow, these things happen. And it puts everything into perspective really quickly about how important life is and friends and family.
Yeah.